from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up today on Ag Day, China is imposing tariffs on U.S. pork, nuts, and wine. But are soybeans still a worry?
That soybeans will very likely be a target of future tariff action.
We kick off our I-80 planting tour for this season, and it's slow moving in western Iowa.
It's been raining off and on for the last month or so.
An analysis, macroeconomic factors which move the markets.
The last quarter's GDP that just came out was a little bit better than anticipated, but we're not at that 3% plus.
And Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue is on the road again, this time to Michigan.
Ag Day, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Betsy Gibbon, in for Clinton Griffiths. There are new signals today that China may be ready to hit U.S. soybeans with tariffs. An official with the U.S.-China Business Council says his colleagues have been meeting with Chinese government officials. The USBC represents American companies doing business in China. During those talks, soybeans were mentioned as a possible target for future retaliation should the United States announce additional trade measures.
The U.S.-China Business Council's conversations with senior Chinese government officials indicate that soybeans will very likely be a target of future tariff action. They recognize that soybean growers in the United States are part of President Trump's core political constituency, and that not only would it impact the overall trade deficit and one of China's largest imports from the United States, it may also have political ramifications for the administration in the future.
Parker says the ongoing U.S.-China trade tension could open the door for other international competitors to capture the U.S. market share in the Asian country. The U.S. shipped about $14 billion worth of soybeans to China during the last marketing year. China accounts for more than half of U.S. soybean shipments. China raised import duties on $3 billion worth of U.S. goods in response to the tariffs on imported steel and aluminum that President Trump ordered last month. However, China has not responded to the threat of additional U.S. tariffs stemming from intellectual property thefts. But if they do, Parker believes soybeans could be targeted in those countermeasures. The status of U.S. trade policy is a moving target. It can change in a moment's notice with a few keystrokes on the president's Twitter account. On Monday morning, the president took to Twitter and reiterated a threat to pull out of NAFTA if Mexico does not stop people and drugs from flowing into the U.S. from Central America. At the same time, Bloomberg is reporting the administration is pushing for a preliminary NAFTA deal to be announced at a summit in Peru next week. According to that report, the White House wants leaders from Canada and Mexico to join in unveiling the broad outlines of an updated pact at the Summit of Americas that begins April 13th. The latest Ag Economy Barometer from Purdue University and the CME addresses NAFTA and other trade issues. The survey of 400 producers was conducted during the third week of March after U.S. imposed steel tariffs, but prior to China's response. The surveyors asked about the likelihood the U.S. would withdraw from NAFTA. Their responses were mixed. More than one-third of respondents provided a neutral response, meaning it could go either way. 28% expect the U.S. to remain in the trade pact, but 34% expect the U.S. to vacate the deal.
The largest share of producers, more than a third, had told us that they see this as a neutral likelihood, so giving us that 5 rating. So that tells us there's a lot of unknowns or ambiguity as to how producers think this is going to play out over the next several months.
The overall producer sentiment drifted lower in March. Purdue economists saw declines in attitudes about current conditions and future expectations. Despite the drop, attitudes are still more positive than they were during most of 2016. But the idea of a trade war is unsettling. Tyne Morgan joins us from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. Tyne?
Thanks, Betsy. Yeah, as you mentioned, we saw the Ag Economy Barometer decline a little this month, and we're here now with Jim Mintert, who not only combs through the data but compiles the data each month for the Ag Economy Barometer. Jim, why do you think it's just now that trade is really eating into producer sentiments?
I think people became much more concerned about trade when President Trump announced his intention to impose tariffs on aluminum and steel imports from China. At that point, I think it became more real that that was going to take place, and that increased the likelihood of seeing some retaliation on the part of importing countries, especially China.
What do you think has to change to regain producer confidence again?
Well, I think producers are going to look very closely at prices. The price reaction, at least in the short run, hasn't been as negative as perhaps you might have expected. But that depends on what happens going forward. China's response to President Trump's imposition of the tariffs was actually quite measured. And so it depends on what happens going forward. Do we escalate or do we actually negotiate? And I think people are still cautiously optimistic that this won't turn into a full-blown trade war. It's more like a trade battle at this point. If it turns into a trade war, I think that's very negative for U.S. agriculture. And of course, the part that wasn't touched so far was soybeans. And that's really the critical factor, especially here in the Midwest.
Do we escalate or do we negotiate? Thank you, Jim. We appreciate it. Again, Jim Mintert with Purdue University, that Ag Economy Barometer that just came out today showing a dip in producer sentiments. Reporting from Purdue University, I'm Tyne Morgan.
The I-80 Planting Tour, brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
Snow continues to fall in pockets across the Corn Belt, delaying the start of spring. But it's not going to stop our planting coverage. We kick off our first I-80 Planting Tour report of the season this morning. The two farmers we talk with are seeing a dusting of snow for now, which means spring is still a ways away. Farmers won't let the first nice day of spring pass.
Just getting stuff ready to go.
Especially this year in western Iowa.
Just can't wait to get started. Of course, we're all like that.
It's been raining off and on for the last month or so.
As farmers Mike Schropp and Mike McGuire haven't seen many days like these during the first taste of spring.
It's probably not going to be an early start for us.
It's a little slow moving here in western Iowa as farmers wait for the date where they are officially covered under federal crop insurance. But despite that, farmers here still wait for dry and warm weather. Both have been battling soggy planting weather in the past.
About the last 3 springs in a row, we've been fighting the wet weather. The bottom ground's really been a struggle the last couple of years.
A dreary forecast and soupy fields this year means hardly any spring field work has been done, unusual in their areas.
Not this spring. I haven't seen anybody doing anything. I think those conditions just haven't been good for it.
Thankfully, these farmers say they both completed majority of their work in the field last fall, saying others who have not moved a wheel much since harvest are in worse shape.
I did an awful lot last fall, more than I've ever done. I worked until December 18th around here out in the field doing stuff, so it was a really good fall to get stuff done.
With action on the field limited, selling has been heightened as each made moves on the mark at the beginning of the year.
We're probably 40% sold on beans and maybe about the same on corn.
Schropp even selling more than he planned.
So I sold about all my beans in about 2 weeks' time. There, in fact, I'm out. Sold them all.
As the two wait for soil temperatures to rise, they prepare for another year.
So I'm a little heavier corn this year, but in this area, I think it's going to be back to more of a 50-50 rotation.
50-50 corn and beans. I've thought about planting a lot more beans, but I'm not going to do it. Should have done it last year.
Working to be ready.
No, I'm always ready to go.
When the next nice day of spring arrives. McGuire says even if this spring is late, he's not planning on switching his acreage mix unless planting becomes extremely late because he already has most of his inputs down. Schropp says his soil temperature was lingering around 39 degrees the last time he checked, which means temperatures have a ways to go before he even thinks about planting. USDA announcing dairy producers may now sign up for coverage under a new and revised margin protection program. The department says the sign-up period begins April 9 and lasts through June 1. The MPP change was signed into law under a spending bill to fund the government back in February. Many dairy industries lobbied for the change, with the old MPP calling it ineffective. The old safety net was placed under the 2014 Farm Bill. It looks a lot like January instead of April across farm country. Mike Hoffman joins us now with more.
Good morning, Betsy. We'll start off in York, Pennsylvania. This is a look outside of Jeffrey Arnold's window. Fresh blanket of snow. He received 4 inches of the white stuff, which makes it seem like the beginning of January or February, not April. And it looks like the weather in southeast South Dakota drastically changed from the beginning of the week. This picture is from Betsy's dad. His area is supposed to receive 3 to 6 inches of snow with lows in the single digits coming up. He's running around getting bedding for his calves to try to keep them warm during calving season. And taking a look at the wind speed forecast, you can see Great Lakes, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic going to start off very windy today. A few spots in the western plains into the eastern Rockies will turn windy as we head through the day. And then by tomorrow morning, Central Plains, the Northeast, kind of on the windy side. And as we head through the afternoon, that'll expand into the Ohio Valley, parts of the northern Mississippi Valley as well. We'll have your forecast coming up. First, here are some hometown temps.
Ever wake up wondering what does today's weather have in store? Well, with weather updates, it delivers the local forecast right to your cell phone each morning to make preparing for the day easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
Next in agribusiness, we focus on the big picture of macroeconomics. Later, China tariffs and its impact on U.S. apple growers. And pack your bag. It's road trip time for the Ag Secretary.
With a uniquely powerful formulation of proven ingredients, Resicor corn herbicide gives you extraordinary power.
Who wants dessert?
At least when it comes to weeds.
How do macroeconomics play a role in commodities, and what should you pay attention to as well? Clinton Griffiths joins us at the Agribusiness Desk.
Jim McCormick with Allendale, our guest here at the Agribusiness Desk today. Jim, over the last year or so, we've talked a lot about the stock market. We've talked a lot about the value of the U.S. dollar. We've looked at the world economy. All of those things seem to be moving and clicking right along. Is it still the case? Is that still moving in that direction?
I think actually we're probably slowing down a little bit. The fourth quarter GDP was a little bit better than the last quarter's GDP that just came out was a little bit better than anticipated, but we're not at that 3% plus. It looks like the growth, the Fed's starting to raise interest rates. As they start raising the interest rate, that kind of is a little bit of red flag for the stocks. The stock market's definitely a little bit jittery about trade tariffs, trade wars. That's never good for companies. So we're seeing a little bit of weakness in the stock market, and that's driving hopefully some money into the commodities. The job market has been on fire. It's some of the best jobs we've had in years. You're starting to see wages start firming up. That's going to get you inflation. And the one thing that's good for producers and people who like to trade commodities is you get inflation. Yeah. Because if you get inflation, how do you hedge it? You buy commodities. Yeah. So that's a good sign, I think, for the long run as we get this little bit of inflationary push into the market. That should hopefully help either support bearish prices or even propel maybe the corn and wheat market higher.
Yeah, as we see some of the issues going on in the financials, we talk a lot about how that kind of gets people more interested in commodities. And tell people why, because I don't know if we always make that connection.
Well, right now they tend to run in inverse. It seems like when the stocks go weaker, the commodities tend to go higher, and vice versa. And like I said, after this phenomenal run, we've been on a 9-year run on the stocks. They really have pushed it to the limit. And investors are going to look for something cheap. Now, if you look at the price of corn today, well, it's a little over $4. Now, it's not the dirt cheap prices we were at 20 years ago, but just think, 7-8 years ago, we had $8 corn. Yeah. We had beans up near 20. So beans even at 10, they look cheap. And that's what you want to do. The investor's looking for investment opportunities of something that's low price, looking to gain in value.
And commodities
are a good one.
All right. Appreciate it, Jim. Thank you so much. We'll be back with more Ag Day. Just a minute.
To talk to Jim McCormick one-on-one, contact Allendale Incorporated at 815-578-6166 or email Jim at jmccormick@allendale-inc.com. You could win a 2018 John Deere Gator from Valent USA. Visit valentfullyloaded.com to enter.
Welcome back to Ag Day with meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Now, Mike, as you know, I'm from southeast South Dakota, and my dad reminded me last year we had snow May 1st.
May 1st.
May 1st, typical South Dakota. But how common is it to have snow like this around the U.S. during April?
Well, it's not very common in some of these southern areas that have been getting it, Central Plains into the Ohio Valley, but it's fairly common, like where you live and farther north into the northern plains. But this is the root zone moisture map. This shows how much water there is in the top layers of the soil itself. And you can see this is straight from NASA. So this is from a satellite, and it gets the data and goes right into this map. Very wet Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley. Of course, some of that is melted snow. Parts of the Great Lakes wet. Also Montana, northern Wyoming wet. But very dry in the Four Corner region. That's extending eastward into parts of Kansas, northern Texas, western Oklahoma, even over into parts of Missouri and Illinois, although those areas have improved over the past couple of weeks. Here's what's going on right now. Storm system moving through the eastern Great Lakes in the northeast. Snow in the northern part of that, and some of that will come all the way down into the central Appalachians by later on today. You can see the showers and thunderstorms then heading off the east coast down into northern Florida, though. Next system diving into the northern plains. A little bit of snow there in North Dakota by later today. That'll be spreading into Minnesota and Wisconsin as we head through tomorrow morning. Next storm system kind of swirling off the west coast. It's eventually going to bring in some rain. You can see especially during the day tomorrow in the parts of central northern California, but especially western Washington and Oregon and some mountain snow. That initial system then spreading rain and snow across the Great Lakes. Checking out precipitation estimate past 24 hours. Some decent amounts where the thunderstorms hit. Parts of Indiana and Ohio all the way down into eastern Texas. Adding in the next 36 hours, you'll notice that we spread some across the northern portions of New England especially, and we add some to the northwest and northern Rockies as well. Snowfall past 24 hours, adding in the next 36. We'll spread a little bit farther south into some of those lake effect areas, add some more in Maine, and also add a little bit more across the northern tier of states back through the plains. Highs today, this afternoon, 20s and 30s in the north, a little bit milder down to the south, but lows tonight going to be in the 30s all the way into northern Georgia, Alabama. Teens farther north, 50s along the Gulf Coast. Tries to start warming up anyway. Once again in Oklahoma and Texas tomorrow. Still on the chilly side through the Great Lakes in the northeast. And it's all because of this big rotating area of low pressure in the jet stream level, keeping things cold in the northeast quadrant of the country, occasionally into the southeast. That is going away, though, in 7 to 10 days, so maybe we'll change things eventually here. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We head to Spokane, Washington, first of all. A few flurries, otherwise becoming partly sunny, high 47. Bartlesville, Oklahoma, bright sunshine but chilly, high 55. And Montpelier, Vermont, cloudy with times of rain, high of 53.
Up next, U.S. apple growers are wondering how China tariffs will impact their bottom line. Details next from our partners at the Packer. Plus, USDA gives a tune-up to the old RV as Ag Secretary Perdue is ready to hit the road again this year. In news from our partners at the Packer, the pork industry is not the only sector worried about retaliatory tariffs slapped on its product. Apple growers are on edge too. Apples are also in the middle of a U.S.-China trade spat with a 15% tariff on its product. Washington is the largest producer of apples and sweet cherries in the United States. China bought roughly $50 billion worth of apples from Washington last year. A stormy close to California's rainy season has slowed the state's plunge back into drought. This week, a state water agency measured the Sierra Nevada snowpack. The welcome run of rain and snowstorms last month more than doubled the state's snow totals for the year, hiking it to 52% of normal. The snow surveyor says March precipitation was good, but not great. But going into March, the snowpack was only about a quarter of normal levels. Up next, the Ag Secretary takes a road trip. We'll show you where he's headed next on Ag Day.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue is back on the road this year for his third Back to Our Roots RV tour. He started this road trip last summer, hitting state fairs in the Midwest. Later in the summer, he toured New England. On Tuesday, Secretary Perdue visited 3 locations in south central Michigan, starting at Michigan State University. He talked with ag students and toured some of the research labs at the Land Grant School. Later in the day, he toured a brand new pork processing plant and a greenhouse facility, both in Coldwater, Michigan. USDA says the RV tour allows the secretary to hear directly from the American people and the agricultural community. And there's no shortage of topics this year. Besides the current trade strife, Congress is also working on a farm bill. No shortage of comments there. Secretary Perdue will also visit Ohio and Kentucky this week. Well, that's all the time we have this morning. We're glad you tuned in. For Clinton, Mike, and Tyne, I'm Betsy Gibbon. Have a great day.